Gambit Chads, do I have a treat for you? The Danish Gambit is one of the most fun lines in chess, but the issue with the Danish Gambit, and it's a great way to punish king's pawns openings in general, the issue with the Danish Gambit, which is with this move c3 here, is that your opponent is likely to be prepared for this. Just as an e5 player in general, this has gotten very common, and this move d5 really just kind of kills a lot of the fun of the Danish Gambit in general, that black equalizes very quickly here with like takes, bishop e7, and then could just play a move like knight to f6 in this position, and is completely fine. Or they can even play the Stockfish approved lines of taking, and then one of the ideas here is that you can actually sacrifice 2 pawns. But there's a lot of great ways for black, if they know what they're doing here, to either play these lines with bishop to b4 check or knight f6, or even this counter sacrifice with d5, giving one of the pawns back, and then after knight to f6, there's some lines here where some complicated lines here actually after bishop takes f7 check, where the position is just completely equal. So there's very fun. It's very fun if our opponent doesn't know what they're doing and just plays like knight to f6, d6, bishop e7, castles, whatever. And this is where you can find a lot of videos on the internet where just like win very quickly with the Danish Gambit, but you might find playing them in actuality, they won't work. They won't work because a lot of people are quite well prepared. However, if only there was a good workaround where you could get both, where you could get the fun of the Danish Gambit and also surprise your opponent. And now here's an interesting point. If black here plays knight c6, the best move in this position is actually knight to f3. It's just a standard developing move with knight to f3, and we can transpose back into this position where black has no easy outs and actually has to deal with the fact that these bishops can slice right down their kingside, and there's really nothing they can do about it. There's no easy outs here, and they have to face these bishops in exchange for us gambiting 2 pawns. However, how do we get to this position? How do we get to such an excellent, such a fun position? Okay, here's the trick. We play knight to f3, knight to c6, right? I mean, if your opponent is a Bush-Gas Gambit or Petrov or Stafford player, then this won't work. But with knight to c6, we play your d4, as if we're playing a Scotch, and after pawn takes d4, we play here now c3. And black here has a couple other options, d5, d3, and knight to f6, and I'll cover them all towards the end of this video. But of course, there's the Stockfish approved d takes c3. And you guessed it, we're playing in this position, bishop to c4, and there's no easy out. And this is really fun. I'm really excited about this because I think this can work at any level, and I'm really excited to also play this against titled players and post those Twitch streams on my channel. And the other thing I want to make sure I do in this video is make sure all the ideas that I present here are very easily digestible, that there's nothing you'll forget in your games, that the ideas here are going to be very clear, very simple, and I think this line lends itself really well to that. While also making sure I touch on everything, and I have the database open here, so you guys can check me on this, so it's not like one of those videos you see on the internet, checkmate in 10 moves, but in reality your opponents are almost always playing something different. So I'm making sure we cover everything, making sure your opponent has no easy outs. And I think, in general, this is not something people know. This is not something people know, that there's c3 now in the Scotch. I mean, the Scotch Gambit is this move bishop to c4, and mainline Scotch is just recapturing this pawn. But we're playing c3, allowing this pawn to be taken, and now bishop to c4. So I made a lot of big claims about how great this is. It's time to back them up. In this position, I will be covering a few moves, which is d6, knight to f6, and c takes b2. And in addition, we're going to be taking on all of Stockfish's top recommendations, and I have the engine ready to go here. Okay, c takes b2 is the most common move. What, black grabbing an additional pawn. In some lines, we'll be playing knight takes c3, which is just a nice way to grab back your pawn. But often we'll be trying to activate that other bishop as well with bishop takes b2. So here, black has 2 options. In general, they can play bishop to b4 check, but as their last chance to make that check, because our next move is simply castling. And in general, they're going to have a lot of issues on f7. Or they can play knight to f6, and they won't be able to play bishop to b4 with check. And actually, let's start with knight to f6. I think bishop to b4 check is a better option because black at this point is way behind development, and they want to develop as quickly as possible to hopefully get that king to safety. And you'll see the issues that can result with knight to f6 in a moment. So basically, we castle now, and there's a few options that black has, and none of them are very good, because in this position, we're actually threatening this move knight to g5, which can attack the f7 pawn, and there's just no good way to defend it. Often there's knight e5 as a nice defense defending f7 and attacking the bishop. However, our bishop is sniping that e5 square, so that won't be possible. So if we move like d6, by the way, which is one of the more common moves in this position, after knight to g5, yeah, you see how I have some arrows there? The game is effectively over because the f7 pawn is hit. Black cannot castle. That's a key point. The bishop is on f8. Castling just deals with f7 in general. It's why a lot of attacks on f7 are just pretty dumb, because if you follow opening principles, develop your pieces, castle your king, your rook should hold the f7 pawn. In this position with the bishop on f8, it's a good opportunity to hit f7. So we're castling first. You'll note the reason why we didn't play knight to g5 right away is not working, because black has this move bishop to b4 check, after which their next move is castles with the rook protecting f7, and then we're just 2 pawns down. So we need to make sure we justify this. So castles, okay, d6 not a good move. Knight takes e4, I'll note. Going for your third pawn is a terrible, terrible move. There's a lot of things that just win in immediately, including just rook to e1, threatening to win the knight, because it's pinned to the king. d5 does not help, just bishop takes d5, our queen also defends. f5 is the only thing that holds the knight. After queen to d5, you see the arrow there, it's threatening mate. Queen e7 defends mate. And you could just even grab that pawn, so you're taking this knight for free. So knight takes e4 is a terrible, terrible choice. Black needs to not grab more pawns and instead try and escape with their king. So we'll look at both bishop to c5 and bishop to e7, as you see being the 2 most common moves in this position, both of which prepare to castle next turn. But the issue is that what we're going to play is this move e5, attacking the knight. So this is what we want to do against knight f6, right? We castle, we know we're threatening knight to g5. If they play bishop out, then we know we're not threatening knight to g5 anymore. But what we can do is we can play this move e5, attacking this knight, and the knight is not having many good squares in general. Knight to e4 falls victim to tactics like, actually, like queen d5, I'm sure. Threatening mate and threatening the knight, and effectively ending the game. Knight to g4 being the most common move in this position. We just kick that knight around, drives the knight to h6, which would be even worse if we actually still had a bishop there that could ruin black's pawn structure over there. And all we're going to do is bring this knight into the game, knight to d5, bring our queen up, centralize our rooks, and this is excellent, excellent compensation for these pawns. There's a lot of threats coming. Black is not going to have any fun developing their queen side. This is a very, very difficult task. I'll actually just show you a couple lines here. Let's say black, I don't know, plays something like this. I believe here there's this move, knight to f6 check, a really, really nasty strike, because our queen is hitting that knight if they take with the g-pawn. If they take with the bishop, then you'll note this bishop comes into play. So a lot of really, really fun stuff there. Or, I mean, you can't go wrong just centralizing your rooks. And so this is just a fantastic, fantastic position to play for white. Overwhelming compensation. And the idea of the knight coming all the way in to d5 is something you'll see again. That's what we'll be wanting to do in general with that queenside knight. And bishop to c5 instead of bishop to e7 is pretty similar in the fact that we're just playing e5. But this position is actually even worse for black, because if they follow the most common lines with knight g4, we have a nice little tactic here. You can pause the video, go and try and find it. It's the fact that this bishop's now unprotected all the way out here, and what we can do is take it, and queen to d5 check. And this is just overwhelming because this is a +2 position, simply because we're only down 1 pawn and black will never castle again. They've moved their king, and yeah, just an absolutely crushing position here. We don't play queen d5 right away because queen to e7 is actually defending both mate and the bishop. So that's why we make sure to play bishop takes f7 check, right? Black is just 1 move away from having castled and having the rook defending there. We play bishop takes f7 check, take there, and with a winning position. So knight to f6 is actually not a good move. If they take b2 and play knight to f6, all you need to do is castle. Remember this idea of knight g5 hitting f7, and otherwise play e5, hit that knight. So slightly better is to try for bishop to b4 check. And so we play knight to c3, getting out of check. And so now knight to f6 and castles. So here black has a few options, right? They can castle their king at long last. They can achieve the castling, only that the bishops are still aiming to where that king is. They can play this move d6. And d6 is helpful because we saw how annoying e5 was before chasing that knight around. d6 maybe can try to stop e5. And the other option is bishop takes knight before doing either of those things. And why might that be a good idea, you ask? Why might that be a good idea, you ask, is because after castles, which is the most common move, we play here knight to d5. And so this is the big idea in general, right? We get the setup, we play bishop c4, we play bishop takes b2, we castle our king, and all we need to do, we need to remember to do is stick that knight right on d5. And it is an extremely, extremely annoying knight, and very, very difficult for black to deal with. Black thinks they've castled, they think they've made out scot-free, up 2 pawns, they have nothing developed on the queen side, and we're threatening to take f6 and force g takes f6. because our bishop is preventing queen takes f6 there. They would lose their queen. So basically, we're hitting this knight. We're hitting this knight, and we'll look at both here, knight takes d5 and knight takes e4 in this position, as well as the engine recommendation of bishop back to e7. But that's, you can see here, not the most common option. So knight takes e4 is a bit of a blunder because of this really nice move, queen c2, and this hidden idea. So we're attacking this knight, and they can throw in rook e8, and we're just going to play rook e1, actually, to force that knight to move. But if they retreat the knight, the idea is that we take this, we're down 3 pawns at the moment, but after queen c3, we will be up a piece. We are threatening mate and threatening the knight over there, and so we are winning that knight and just up a piece, and with excellent development. This isn't the sort of situation where they have enough pawns to cover for the piece, because they just have no development. And our rooks just have great squares. So the idea is that we take here and go queen c3, hitting the knight and threatening mate. I told you these bishops do excellent work there. So queen c2 is the big idea against knight takes e4. Nice little trick. Otherwise, the most common move is taking this knight, and we play pawn takes d5. And so I know we block this bishop, we block the diagonal for this bishop, but it's often going to reroute to that diagonal, and we still have the excellent dark square diagonal. So knight e7 being overwhelmingly the most common move in this position, and here it's actually already completely losing. It's pretty funny. It's like +5 or 6. You play your queen d4, threatening mate. And so f6 is impossible because of this move d6 check. It is check, and you take the knight next turn with a nice little discovery there. So black here must play knight f5 to defend g7. We play queen g4, hitting the knight, also attacking g7. So they play here d6, fortifying their knight, also kind of developing a piece. Looks like they'd be okay. They can play g6 if they need to, but the knight is otherwise holding the g7 and is defended. But now this nice move bishop to d3, and a lot of people just play g6 thinking that they've fortified this knight sufficiently, but we take this bishop to d3 had the additional threat of winning a piece. It's not like black had anything in this position anyway. 2 things are attacked in addition to the mate threat they have to deal with, so black is completely lost. Otherwise, other moves also lose a piece. Black's lack of development is really getting underscored here. Queen d4, they have queen f6, as long as they didn't put the knight in the way of the queen, actually. So all you have to do here is drop the bishop back to d3, do his attack for a moment. Black here plays a natural move like d6. And now after queen to a4, black is actually a piece down because that bishop is trapped. They play c5. We attack it. It's trapped. They can hit our queen once more. It is nonetheless a trapped bishop on b4. So black is losing a piece in this case. And otherwise, I mean, their position is just quite bad, like knight b8. You can just drop this bishop back to d3. You have nice ideas here like queen b1, which both attack h7 and threaten to go bishop takes g7 and queen takes b4 with a nice little trick there. So black is just not having fun here after this move knight to d5. Their best option is this move bishop to e7. And this is all following all the mainline stuff, top recommendations. We can grab that bishop out of the way and now just play this move e5. And again, try to harass this knight, bring our rooks to the middle of the board. And this position is just, not going to be very fun for black. I think the engine evaluates this as about equal. But, we're 2 pawns down and we have all the files, all the diagonals in the world. And black is kind of suffering and struggling to, not blunder things. So if this is the best black can do, and also, they need to find the right square for the knight. And knight g4, I believe, is not the right square for the knight. If this is the best black can do, that's really not much of a concern. And that's Stockfish's top recommendation, actually, at least in this line. So that's if castle's here. So that's if black does everything right to castle quickly. They play check, they play castles, so they're not getting checkmated, but there's still a ton of pressure on them. And actually, there are checkmate threats that they can blunder nonetheless in that line with queen d4 and attacking g7. So they have another option of getting rid of this knight and now castling. And this is a pretty interesting position because here we have a very, very creative and rare idea. So, I mean, this is a very smart player knowing to get rid of the knight. And this is going back to, I think, a lot of just common Danish ideas. These are just the fun lines of the Danish Gambit that we've gotten. And here, what we're going to do is play knight to g5. We're going to do is play knight to g5, and we're threatening to play e5, making that knight move, and then queen to h5, which would attack h7 and f7 if we can make this knight move away from here. And so the natural move is just to play h6, be like, what are you doing? Why do you bring this knight into enemy territory? They don't have knight e5 because we have the bishop here. So why do you bring this knight into enemy territory? We say, because we wanted to go for this exchange. We wanted to go for this exchange because black just has nothing developed. So ordinarily, this would be a very bad idea. We give up an active knight and bishop for a rook and a pawn. We know we're not supposed to do that. However, here, it's just a way to tear open the king because black just has nothing out. We have here e5, which wouldn't be possible if black had just one more developing move with d6, but this is why we sacrificed that material. Was for time. We started out with a huge development advantage, and so we got to strike very quickly to justify the fact that we sacrificed 2 pawns for that development advantage. So we play our e5, and making that knight move, like I said, and playing like queen to h5 check, and just lots and lots of fun things here. We can bring the rooks in. Yeah, so the point of rook e1 here is to answer d6 actually with e6, so the rook defends from the bishop, and these pawn can storm all the way down. This is a really, really fun position to play with the white pieces. So that's if h6 here. Black can also try this move d6, which holds e5, and so we're not just going to take it now because we don't have e5 at the end of it, but what we can do here is actually just play f4 because we want to play e5. And it launches some pretty fun lines here, it's actually with h6, and now we play your e5 right away, which is so some pretty crazy stuff. If they take our knight, we take here, and again, bishops are doing such incredible work here just to tear open the enemy king. And so if black plays d takes e5, we have this fun line of going knight takes f7, hitting the queen. They play takes, we play takes, and now if they take our knight over there, we trade everything and go f takes e5, and actually win that knight at the end because that knight is pinned. So really fun stuff. We can try to play e5. We're really using all of our pieces to their maximal potential there. And you'll note that this actually can transpose if black here plays d6, the other option instead of castles, because, okay, they want to hold e5 at bay, but we go here knight g5, and we go f4, and just trying to play e5, and just trying to play knight takes f7 and queen h5, and all these really, really fun things. And even if you don't remember everything, like, just go for it. Just go for it. At the end of the day, that's the common thread, that's the common theme among all these moves, is that we're going so aggressive, and we're trying to attack, and we're trying to strike really quickly before our opponent, is able to castle, is able to play d6, and is able to, get all this stuff out. But just go for it and put the pressure on your opponent to find all these defenses. And again, even if they do, it's still, they're struggling and they're still defending and just trying to cling on to those 2 extra pawns. So we definitely have the more practical game from that point of view. And so here, black has one more option, which is to play d6 instead of castling, or instead of even take on c3. And we know if they don't take our knight on c3, we bring it into d5, right? Knight d5 is lots of fun. And this is actually, I think, just a mistake by black, because we're threatening here knight takes f6 to force g takes f6 with the bishop there. And if they take our knight, as most people do, it immediately blunders a piece, because with the king still on e8, this knight has to move, and queen to a4 check, as the arrow showed, will pick up that bishop, as long as that's checked there. So basically, the big idea here, if the bishop's on b4, we play knight c3, knight d5, right? If they go bishop to b4 check in this position, in this key position after c takes b2, we're going knight c3, we're castling, we're playing knight d5. I mean, either way, we're castling as soon as we can. Presumably, our opponent doesn't just blunder g7 after bringing the bishop out. Like, they put, the knight in the way or something. And if they get rid of that knight, then we remember this really cool knight g5 idea we had to try and take f7 and to push e5 at all costs. And otherwise, if they play knight to f6 without bishop to b4 at all, they play knight to f6 without bishop to b4 at all, like I said, we're just castling. And with the bishop still on f8, it gives us the idea of playing knight to g5 and hitting f7 very quickly. And if they move the bishop, we go back to this e5 idea. So lots and lots of fun stuff there if they take everything. These are the most fun lines of the Danish Gambit. The Danish Gambit starts in this position, and genuinely the best, like if black plays knight c6, which is just one of the lines that, they no longer have these counter sacrifice ideas to just, bail out of it into an equal position, or to, just play their theory that they know knight c6 is really not one of the better moves. But if they do play knight c6, we have knight f3. So we're basically transposing into a very good version of the Danish Gambit, because knight f3 is what you want to play anyway. So can black avoid this? I mean, c takes b2 is the engine's recommendation in this position. We can cover a couple other things other than c takes b2. So we have here knight to f6. Knight to f6 is an option, and of course we just castle anyway. There's no harm in just playing knight takes c3, but we can do better. So we castle quickly. We always want to castle quickly in all these lines. C takes b2 here is I just wrote transpositions because it does transpose into stuff. And we can follow here the second most common move other than c takes b2, because you may just transpose back into it, but it's the move bishop to c5 here. And what we play here is e5. You guys know this idea. If the knight moves, you guys have seen this idea. It's takes and queen to d5 check with a killer position. Just taking that bishop and getting everything back in this position, and it's fantastic. We've seen this before. E5, their best move is this move D5, but all we need to do is take the knight, take another pawn there. So D5 is kind of a weird move counterattacking us, our bishop, but we can just take the knight, take the pawn there, and we're doing totally fine. So knight to f6, really not a good move. They're kind of in a state of limbo where they took one of the pawns but not the other one. We castle, we still have our ideas of e5, and we still have, all the fun stuff from the Danish Gambit coming up. And at any point you could play knight takes c3, but we can strike faster. We can strike faster. You can play castles, and here look at playing e5 right away. So black here can play this move d6 and castles, and now knight f6. So basically, with this move d6, and actually you can get that in the other order as well, so they're holding e5 at bay, and they're not spending a tempo activating our bishop in this position. So if they had activated our bishop here, we would just play knight g5, but in this position they have knight e5, we have no bishop on b2, so the knight on e5 is just an excellent defensive resource. Notice they need one of those two resources. They need either knight e5, or they need to be able to castle there. And the bishop on b2 takes away knight e5. The bishop on f8 takes away castling. But alas, we only have one of those two. So if only we had a different way to attack f7. Oh wait, we do. Queen b3. We do. We're hitting f7 here. They don't have castling, so they spent a tempo playing d6 instead of developing the bishop. So d6 takes away e5, but it does not stop a hit on f7, and the bishop's still on f8, stopping their castle. So we play queen b3 here, and now make this very frustrating to defend f7. The knight is still here controlling against knight to e5. It just doesn't do anything now. We will take f7 at the end of that. So black here has queen d7 and queen e7 to defend f7. One is much worse than the other, and fortunately for us, queen e7 is more common. And all we need to do here is just play knight takes c3 with an absolutely crushing position. I have a lot of arrows here, but the position's crushing is the end of the day, is the bottom line. Bishop g5 and knight d5 are coming, hitting the queen there, delivering a pin, or rook e1 and e5 just to blow the e file open. Black's not even close to castling here. Can't move the bishop because the queen takes b7. They're not even close to castling this. g6, like just bishop g5, knight d5. This is killer. You noted one arrow I drew, and it's the difference between queen e7 and queen d7, was knight a5, we just play queen a4 check, which just drives the knight right back to c6. If black had played correctly, which is queen d7, then they're doing better. Because now, so like, let's say we recapture this pawn, they play here knight to a5, and there's no check. There's no check over here, right? So they're hitting the queen and the bishop, so this is a good resource they have. If they don't have knight a5, they really have nothing, because bishop e7 is not possible because taking f7. So they have knight a5 here, which is a good trade for them. However, here, I mean, we're only down one pawn, and we still have some good compensation here, playing rook d1 and e5 next turn, and the engine evaluates this to equality. But like I said, I'd much rather be white here. We're playing e5, we're bringing our rook into the game, we're bringing our bishop out, and so this is nice stuff. In spite of black surviving by getting, the trade they wanted there. Once they trade on c4, they can play bishop e7 because, there's nothing to take off 7. So, anyway, that covers everything other than that covers all this other stuff other than the big questions of can we force them into these lines? I've covered everything. Yes. Can we force them into these lines, right? Do they have to play d takes c3 at all in this position? I started this video by claiming that if the knights are back here, right, that black has easy outs, like in particular d5 on the second move. Okay, what if they play d5 now? What is the difference? What is the difference? So we could play pawn takes. We could play pawn takes, and this is actually Stockfish's recommendation for white, evaluates this to quite equal. But basically, black can play bishop to g4 and castles and put some pressure on d4. And this is an interesting position, but it's not much. It's not much of a gambit either. But after d5, we have a really tricky move, and I like this move a lot. It's a lot scarier than I think it looks. It's the move bishop to d3. To move bishop to d3, so we develop something and we defend this pawn. We're still down a pawn at this exact moment because they took d4, we never took anything back. And black here has a couple options for capturing. And they also have knight f6 and bishop to g4. I'll touch on those moves as well. So knight to f6, what we're going to do here is we're going to play e5. And after knight to e4, which is the best move to deal with that knight, knight e4, we're going to castle. We're just going castle because, I mean, c takes d4 is completely possible. We grab our pawn back and, consolidate into a nice structure. But after bishop to b4 check, it's kind of an annoying check to deal with. And I'd rather just be castled. And we give them one more opportunity, actually, to play the most common move, which is d takes e3. C takes d4 is what we're going to play next, after which we're totally fine. But if they play here d takes e3, I like giving them the option for this gambit I like this gambit a lot, actually. All we're going to do next is what my arrows say here. What my arrows say here. Both our rooks have just really nice files to go to. This rook pressures here. This rook defends this pawn nicely. We play h3 to take away bishop to g4. Our dark square bishop can come out. And another thing we'd like to do here is play bishop c2 and queen d3 to threaten mate on h7 and oblige black to have to play g6. So, for example, like let's say bishop c2, castles, queen d3, threatening mate on h7. Now they have to play g6, and now we can proceed with some other nice development stuff, and eventually we can try to attack over there. So I like this gambit a lot for white, actually. So that's safe knight f6, but I don't think knight f6 is a particularly common move. It's the fourth most common move. Bishop to g4, I'll include it just because it's Stockfish's recommendation, and I feel an obligation to include that. But it's kind of hard to play this in a game, given you've seen something surprising and you've got like all these captures right in front of you. And there's a reason it's not that common, but anyway, it's Stockfish's recommendation, so I'll include it here. Basically, all we're going to do is castles and play this move rook to e1, and here I'll just follow the Stockfish line here, which is bishop to e7, covering up the king. We play our e5, hitting the knight, and we're not able yet to play c takes d4. That's the point of this pin. Black would just take this pawn. We play here this nice move, bishop to b5, threatening to play c takes d4, and now if they finally oblige to play d takes e3, I mean, the thing is, like, we're kind of fine either way. We're fine playing c takes d4, getting that. We're also fine if they play d takes c3, because knight takes is just a really pleasant recapture. And here we're attacking the d5 pawn, and we're doing totally fine. So that's not really the most intimidating option for black, I don't think. And so here we'll touch on d takes c3 and d takes e4. And okay, I'll save the most exciting for last. D takes c3 is very, very exciting. I'll save that for last. But, well, let's touch on here d takes e4. It's the most common one. And all we're going to do is play bishop takes e4. And our bishop is actually really, really well located. It's really, really well located. So if they play here, most common move, knight f6, hitting our bishop, we're going to play takes. We're going to grab that knight, ruin their pawn structure a bit, castles, give them one more option for a gambit. One more option for a gambit if they want to grab that c3 pawn. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. We're going to throw in this move rook to e1 check. We've castled, and they've taken now too much stuff here. We've castled, we play here rook to e1. And now here, bishop to e7, bishop to e6, both possible. Bishop to e7, I believe we can just go trade. And they take c3 here. And I guess black's technically up a pawn, but things that extra pawn there. So they have 3 on 2 over here, but the thing is, this is the extra pawn. Not very impressive, and 85 is coming, attacking all this stuff. Anyway, and all the rooks come to the middle, so this is very, very pleasant for white. Bishop to e6 is also possible, but there's this nice move, queen to a4, hitting the c6 pawn. I love how long we can leave these pawns on c3. It's actually really, really funny stuff. But we're hitting the c6 pawn. It's a very serious threat because blocking with queen d7 would lose the a8 rook. If you play queen d7 now, then 85 leads to all sorts of additional troubles for black. So basically, if black gets greedy and takes all this stuff, we can get castled and start punishing the king for staying there and for not developing in time. So black here should probably play bishop e7. However, that leads them to maybe just be down a pawn. So we play here knight takes d4, and now we're equal in pawns, threatening c6. If they continue to follow most common moves with bishop to d7, after queen to f3 here, black is pretty much just losing that pawn for essentially nothing here. After c5, knight c6, this is actually even more nasty for black. Whereas our king is safe and sound, and our pieces and pawn structure is totally, totally nice. So this is some fun stuff there. If they grab the e4 pawn, so this is the same kind of anti-Danish thing, but we've included these moves knight to f3, knight c6, which allows bishop to d3 to be possible, because, or else after knight f6, our bishop would just have nothing here. Our bishop would just be attacked, we'd have to move it again. Black would get a free developing move and be up a pawn. But we have this nice move, bishop takes c6, which really messes with black's position a lot. So black here has this move d takes c3. They can try and grab that pawn right now instead of playing knight to f6. And here all we need to do is actually deny that queen trade with his move queen to e2. We have no downside playing queen d2. We're not blocking a bishop here. So we're down 2 pawns, deny the queen trade, and we're threatening this, which would be checkmate. Which would be checkmate because it's double check. That's a really, really nasty and cute checkmate. So they have to block this. And now all we need to do is play knight takes c3, grab our pawn back. Black finally develops their pieces. We again ruin their pawn structure, castles, and bishop to g5. And again, just a really pleasant position. Black's technically up a pawn, but it's a doubled, isolated pawn. And our development and our files for our rooks are just much nicer. You see, they can come to the center of that board and make a bunch of uncomfortable threats for black to deal with. And we can probably attack c6 and win it if we feel like it. So again, just a really, really nice position. Even if you end up down a pawn after these lines of doubling their c7, c6 pawns, you should have enough of initiative to more than compensate for that. So that covers d takes e4 in this position, which is the most common move. And d takes c3 is really interesting because here, instead of playing knight takes c3, we're going to play this nice move, e takes d5. We're going to play this nice move, e takes d5. And after queen takes d5, we can even delay playing knight takes c3, and we can play castle short. And so this is just a really, really interesting position. I didn't include much additional analysis here because I think it's like a kind of just play chess kind of position. Black could grab one more pawn if they're feeling greedy, but otherwise we're going to play knight takes c3 in style. And you can see my common move is bishop e6. We're going to play knight takes c3 in style. We're going to move our queen. We're going to get our rooks into the game. We're going to attack Black's queen and king wherever they go, and just have a lot of fun in these positions. And this evaluates to about 12.1, but like I said, I'd be, give me one here every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So that covers all the stuff here, other than like knight f6 and d3. Touch on that briefly. D3 is just a nothing move. It's just like if Black plays a move here like 6, of course you just c takes d4 and enjoy like a phenomenal center. So Black can play d3 to try and just I'm avoiding all these complications. But it doesn't this position is worse for Black than you think it is. They're actually quite behind on development here. Bishop c5, you can play these moves like d4 and d5 to really harass their pieces in castles, and then try to do something quick in the middle of the board before Black really gets to much safety here. So d3 is really nothing to be afraid of. Knight f6 can be played a couple times. Probably what we really need to do here is play to e5 in the knight. So we would attack our pawn before and playing c takes d4 now. And if checked here, we just play knight takes d2. So you can play a3 and grab that bishop pair. You can also play bishop d5 in castles, and just a really pleasant position for white in general. I think white has a nice center here. I think if Black really wants to challenge the Goring Gambit with move c3, they have to go into the thick of things with d takes c3, and then have to defend some pretty uncomfortable positions. I mean, there's lines like if you're a king pawns player, you might want to look at when it's playing like one of these lines like here with d5 to try and not have to deal with your king getting attacked to that extent, and going to 2 pawns up in exchange for that level of attack. But I think here this is just a better version of the Danish Gambit. This is just a better version of the Danish Gambit. We're giving Black no outs, and we're getting the most fun lines of the Danish Gambit, and we're catching them off guard, and your opponent is definitely going to be unprepared here. Okay, thank you so much, and peace out, Gambit Chats. Have a great day.